Happy to see you. Okay, you darling people, let's have a little chat. So we just think, just be very casual. We think we're going to listen for 90 minutes, or we'll see how we go. Maybe 60 is enough, and we'll see what happens. I think we're scheduled for 90. We'll see how we go. We're going to listen to and think about this topic. You know, if you want to be peaceful, you've got to practice morality. Well, I mean, frankly, it sounds very boring. I don't know, isn't it? Morality and peace. I mean, not many people say they want peace unless they're living in kind of like next to a freeway or something. We don't tend to think we want peace. We all think we want happiness, but in the end, curiously for the Buddha, they're the same, and we'll discuss that. So we think we're going to listen to all these ideas so we can take some tools from it. It's got to be practical, otherwise it's just overwhelming. It's got to be practical, try and make some bullet points from it all, okay? It's for advice to put into practice in your daily life, you know. Why? So you can be peaceful, so you can be happy, but also so you can help others. That's the bottom line, you know. So that's why we're together. We think like that. So what is morality and what is peace? I mean, these are the first questions we should ask. Each of us will have our own view. And I mean, but more directly, why would practicing morality be the method for getting happiness? Because that's where it sounds more kind of it sounds a bit shocking. You mean happiness comes from practicing morality? It sounds peculiar. In fact, it sounds like it's not a very nice happiness. We want exciting happiness, you know. So I mean, to have happiness that's related to being a nice girl doesn't sound very fun, frankly. That's why peace sounds a bit weird, you know. But let's use these words. So what's morality? Well, good ethics. I mean, I think it's a word maybe we prefer in the modern world, isn't it? Ethics. And that means, I mean, it's very clear for the Buddha. I think there's huge discussions in the modern world, lots and lots of debates about exactly what it is. But I think when we start to speak in psychological terms in our modern culture, we don't like to go anywhere near ethics. I've got a feeling it seems a bit tricky to talk about ethics. But what's fascinating for the Buddha, his approach is there's an absolutely direct relationship, because it's the cause. So for the Buddha, the method to get happy, both short-term and long-term, is to practice good ethics. That's it. So of course we have to understand the logic of that. So there's the long-term one. That's where we can really get into more detail about the whole law of karma, this big world view of the Buddhas. But if we keep it more simple, just keep it in day-to-day life, which would be something that anybody could listen to. I mean, let's just discuss it as if you could be a materialist, you could be a Christian, or you could be a Buddhist. But in the end, this is something that's immediate and evident. And I think it's something we can prove, that when the mind is more virtuous, more moral, more ethical, those pretty much are synonymous for the Buddha. And what that means is when your mind is less angry, less attached, less jealous, less depressed, less anxious, less arrogant, less low self-esteem. It's kind of fairly logical. And I think that's something that pretty quickly anybody could prove from their own experience. You don't need to have clairvoyance to look into future and past lives to really look at the big picture of how you get future happiness, you know, because the answer is the same. But I think we can prove it to ourselves by looking into our own lives and minds, or by seeing other people. And this is, and don't think it as religion. This is practical. This is scientific. This is evident. And this is almost the simplest point that the Buddha's making, but the one that we just don't notice in our culture, don't pay attention to, you know. And why is because, okay, forget the word peace, because really being peaceful and being happy from the Buddhist point of view are pretty much the same. And to understand this, you know, the Buddha talks about states of mind. We've got positive states of mind, negative states of mind, like the neurotic, deluded ones. We know this is the Buddhist distinction. This distinct to the Buddha, this particular way of presenting the mind. When you study the Buddhist model of the mind, you learn in the mental consciousness, there are these neurotic, deluded, extremely disturbing, and this is not, again, religion, we can prove it from our own experience, states of mind, such as attachment, anger, jealousy, blah, blah, blah. We know they're deeply painful. And almost right there's enough for the conversation. Straight away, you want to be, you know, you don't go, oh, I was so angry yesterday and I was so peaceful. You do not say that. I was so anxious yesterday and I was so happy. No way. So it's almost so obvious, but we miss it, you know. So in one sense, what Buddha's saying right there immediately, the extent to which your mind is a bit overwhelmed by anxiety, fears, worry, jealousy, depression, anxiety is the extent to which you are not happy, is the extent to which you are not peaceful. So you flip that over, the extent to which your mind is pervaded by, even some degree, by kindness, empathy, compassion, is the extent to which you are peaceful and happy. That's complete logic from the Buddhist point of view. It sounds almost too simple, because we do think it's more complicated. And I think the reason we think it's more complicated is because we are so caught up in believing that there's something out there that's the main cause of being happy and peaceful. There's something out there that's the main cause of being unhappy and unpeaceful. But I mean, let's don't even go there. We don't even need to go there. We don't even need to look anywhere on the outside world. Buddha's expertise is the mind anyway, but his whole point is that a peaceful, happy mind, whether it's moment by moment or for 5 hours or for a day or for even half a, for 1 minute, is a mind that's less angry and more kind, less jealous. And, in other words, the mind is less involved in the neuroses and more involved in the virtue. Now that sounds easy and sounds good, but actually it's quite difficult. If we haven't got, single pointed concentration, if we haven't got really good concentration, this, that we can get from this marvelous technique taught by these Indians well before the Buddha, that he took from them, and then he, when he went in his own direction, took it with him, this shamatha. If we haven't got some semblance of concentration, then our mind is naturally chaotic. It's just the way it is. So even if we're nice people and we're living in vows and we're being virtuous, we're not killing and stealing and lying and raping, and we're attempting not to be angry and shout at people, we can still see our thoughts are pretty chaotic. And that gets us a bit depressed sometimes, but it's just the way it is. Of course, in the materialist model, there are no methods for stopping the mind from being chaotic, because we think of it as the brain, and that's okay, whatever. But here, there are techniques, and that's when you're really going to get blissful feelings, when you're really going to get happy and peaceful and joyful. This is what Lama Yeshe talks about in his wonderful book, Mahamudra. Just getting concentration, as he says in that book, is almost unimaginable. The states of mind of joy and bliss and peace that we can accomplish, that are actually, the Buddha's view is, are our actual state of our natural, that are natural to us. So the real key point for the Buddha, which is easy to hear but hard to apply, because our view is so the opposite, is that a happy mind comes from a happiness which is mental, peace which is mental comes from mental. Chocolate cake cannot be, which is a physical thing, cannot be the main cause of a mental state. That's a pretty logical statement for the Buddha's view. The main cause of a mental state has to be a mental thing. The main cause of something in the mind has to be something in the mind, where that's straight away where Buddha's arguing with the view that we tend to take as an absolute given, that happy feelings come from chocolate cake or handsome boyfriends. And in fact, we so are addicted to that view as a philosophical view, and indeed it's reinforced in our neuroscience and our psychology with respect to us all, that they are the main source of happiness. They're the main source of being peaceful. Well, maybe peaceful, we get a bit we kind of vaguely think meditation has got to do with peace. Happy, we're not sure about meditation. So we think it's something vaguely to do with inside, but it's a bit confusing to us. But in general, a mind that is peaceful is a mind that's happy, not in the way we think. So basically, Buddha's saying, and don't be depressed by this, it sounds like he's being a bit moralistic, but he's not. If we look at it, we'll agree with him, that the happy feelings we do get on the basis of meeting chocolate cake or handsome boyfriends are definitely happy feelings. They are happy feelings. They do qualify. They fit the definition. But they're very distressing. They're very kind of agitated. They're very turbulent. They're very kind of desperate, a bit kind of the happiness of a junkie. And of course, they don't last. They're not very stable. They're not stable at all. They're absolutely not stable. Now we know that, and that's why we freak out, because we know that happy feelings are some kind of thing but we don't know where they come from, and they seem to just pop up one day, and we don't know why. We think it's the cake, and we eat the cake, and then before we realize that we've eaten 4 pieces, and we want to vomit. What happened to the happiness? So we're sort of not so confident, not so clear the methods for getting happy feelings. So this word I keep using, it's a very important word in Buddhist psychology, the word feeling. When you study the text called Lorig, which is this classic text in the Tibetan Buddhist monastic university system, which comes from the great Nalanda tradition, as His Holiness Dalai Lama continues to tell us, there's a text that covers, the fundamentals about the nature, the epistemological model of the mind, which is itself fascinating, which is the way the mind works, how it functions, and then the actual contents of the mind, which is as they call it, the mental consciousness, our mental consciousness. That's what the workshop is, as Lama Zopa puts it. That's where our thoughts and feelings and emotions are, unconscious, subconscious. That's what we're occupied with, preoccupied with all day. And so Buddha's expertise is ways of sorting this out, you know, sorting it out, being our own therapist, as Lama Yeshe puts it. So, okay, so in that model of the mind, Buddha divides all the contents of our mind, and there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of states of mind. I mean, I think they talk in Buddhism about Buddha's saying there are 84,000 neurotic states of mind, and there are 84,000 virtuous ones to counteract them. But then I go and ask the Geshis what text you can find that in. They never know where it is. So maybe it's from Buddha's way back when he said it. No one knows where the 84,000 are. Well, there's a little map somewhere. I'd love to see it. Anyway, we've got these negative and positive states of mind. And our job is, and the key job of being a Buddhist, I always quote this. If you look at the word Buddha, the etymology of the word Buddha, Bud implies the eradication of the rubbish. Da implies the development to perfection of the goodness, of the virtue, and the eradication of the non-virtue. It almost seems too simple. So the job of being a Buddhist, the job of being a Buddhist, the actual job of being a Buddhist is to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues. Why? So you can lessen the neuroses and grow the virtues. So you can become more peaceful and become more happy. That's it. I mean, that's the job from here to Buddhahood. But don't hold your breath. It's going to take a while. Why? Because we're addicted to the wrong methods. So the third category, which is curious, the third category, I always like to call these the mechanics of the mind. They're the parts of the mind that we utterly need to survive, to exist, to do anything, to count, to do anything, to concentrate, to walk, to drive. They're the mechanics of the mind. They call them, never know what they call them, but they're the parts that whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need them. So concentration, a murderer needs good concentration. A sniper needs very good concentration. A meditator needs very good concentration. You know, another one is called mindfulness, which we love that word in our culture. We've got all these bells and whistles on it, but actually it's a state of mind in this third category, one of the mechanics, but simply the ability to not forget what you're doing minute by minute. I mean, we need that just to make a cake, to do anything, to walk from here to the kitchen and you go, oh, what was I doing? That's lack of mindfulness, the ability to remember what you're doing moment by moment. Now, one in that category, this is very curious, is called feeling. And we've only have three kinds. Pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, and neutral feelings. Well, let's forget the neutral, okay? Who cares about them? All we care about is the happy ones and the unhappy ones, the pleasant ones, the unpleasant ones. And those words, we can see there's a spectrum, isn't there? You can have one, you know, if you tracked your day, not in terms of what happened externally, but internally, you could have sort of, you know, wake up in the morning, sort of a bit unpleasant, and then suddenly pleasant, about 3 minutes, and then unpleasant, and then very unpleasant. And you can track it between these two all day, if we had enough awareness, you know. But of course, we don't know where these pleasant and unpleasant feelings come from. We don't know how to, if we do get pleasant ones, we think it's the cake and the boyfriend, but we've discovered that we get the boyfriend and get the cake. They don't last. So we know, we agree with the Buddha. So it's rather distressing. We want them to last desperately. Finally, I found happiness, we'll say, when you meet Fred, you know. But, you know, if you're experienced, it won't last, but we desperately hope it will, cross our fingers. So we don't know how to get stable, pleasant feelings, which is called happiness. Because why? Because we're addicted to the outside. We believe the outside causes. But very clearly, as I said before, a physical object, a person or a cake cannot be the main cause of a mental state. Very clear. It's a very interesting point. It has to be a mental state. So, like I said, the general point that Buddha's making, and this is what I think we can prove, if you check yourself, and one day maybe you're feeling fairly not too miserable, not too neurotic, not too raging, not too depressed. That means you're feeling fairly kind and fairly optimistic and maybe a little bit empathetic. Check your mind. You're fairly peaceful. You're reasonably happy. I think we can prove it. And this is the point right here. Look, 15 minutes, I'm finished. I've got another hour and a quarter to go. That's proof. That's it. Practice virtue. So, okay, we know there are different levels of this in the Buddha's teachings. You know, in the Buddha's teachings, he starts with the very first level of practice, not even looking at our mind yet. This is more like advanced. The very first level of practice is to control your body and speech. You know, we've got these different levels of practice. And if we're familiar with that packaging of the teachings that the Tibetans call the Lam Rim, this gradual path, these stages of the path, all the Buddha's practices are packaged according to the levels of difficulty. So the very first level of practice in this long-term goal of ridding the mind of the rubbish and developing the goodness is you've got to control the servants of the mind first. It's a really obvious point. You know, if you've got a kid raging and shouting and kicking and throwing chairs at you, you can't get him to look at his mind and calm the mind down. You've got to let him try and get him to control his behavior first, you know, and that's the same with us. It's absolutely everybody. So the very first level of practice is the discipline to discipline the body and to discipline the speech. They're the servants of the mind. If you look at the world, what do you think harms others? Your mind is angry, but your fist does the job. You know, your mind is kind, but your hand does the action of generosity. So body and speech, we don't make this distinction like this, body, speech, and mind. It sounds so peculiar to us. Because we just think I'm this big lump of me plodding through life. But we've got to divide the components of me into three. There's the body, the actions of body, speech, and mind. The mind is the point. You get to really become a Buddhist when you get to the middle scope of practice. I like to call it high school. But you first got to subdue your body and speech. And this is a gigantic job. I mean, 99% of us might be good Buddhists, like I'm saying, living in vows and everything. But who can control their speech? I mean, we mightn't go around killing and raping too many people, but who can control their speech? Very few of us. We just blurt out what we feel, you know. So having control, discipline over our body and speech is a pretty stupendous level of morality. This is the first level of practicing virtue in Buddhism, the first level of practicing morality, the first level of practicing ethics. And that implies, of course, refraining from harming others. They're the heaviest actions. Buddha doesn't also, I mean, he suggests in the beginning, the first seven little kind of bullet points, 7 little don'ts that he suggests we put into practice. Not forcing us. He's not a creator. He's like a doctor. He's suggesting, if you want to be happy, Robina, and this is the key point, this is the point to get. This is the point to get. His method for me to become more peaceful and happy is for me to stop harming others. You go, but that's going to help others. Yeah, sure it will. But the main purpose in this first instructions of Buddha is for my benefit. You're the beneficiary. All the teachings in the first and second scopes of Buddhist teachings about controlling your body, speech, and mind, the beneficiary is oneself. This is the wisdom wing. As Lama Zopa says, the rats and roaches will also be happy. They'll have a party. You leave them in peace. So the practice of morality, the practice of ethics, the practice of virtue, the practice of non-harming. There's no discussion yet of actively benefiting. That comes later. The practice of non-harming. Forget even your mind yet. That's the first step in the practice of you getting happy, you becoming peaceful. I mean, it sounds really weird and strange to us, you know. We don't even hardly think of our behavior. We think, I can say what I like. What do you mean? Why should I behave nicely? And if we do hear it, we think it's a policeman telling us what to do, you know, and going to punish us if we don't do it. But Buddha's not a punisher. It's his method for us to get happy. It's his method for us to be peaceful. So that's the ethics of body and speech. Now, to some degree, you can control your body and speech. Now you can get to see your mind. You go to the next scope of practice. Now you've got some space to see what drives your body and speech, you know. So the 7 little bullet points for the Buddha in this practice of good ethics, discipline, the 7 little, the 3 of the body, at least, he says, minimum, at least, don't kill beings, you know. And of course, this gets us, I just didn't discuss karma yet, and this is good enough even to help you become a bit peaceful now. I'm even suggesting this as a method for getting peaceful now. But even if you get future lives, if you can think of a person, you decide you're going to not kill, not steal, not lie, never badmouth, you can see the benefits right now. I promise you. I promise you. This is just scientific. I mean, my family, I often sometimes mention my family. There are 7 siblings. We're all very close in age. You know, the 7 of us, actually, my mother had 8 babies in 9.5 years. So one died. So the 7 of us, and we're like 9 years in between us. So we're all old together now. We're all the same age pretty much. And it's very interesting. I mean, I love all my family. None of them has any interest in Buddhism, or they were all Catholics. They've all given it up. No one's in religion or so-called spirituality, but all good people, good ethical people. So the thing is, naturally as children, we'd always fight. Anyway, we were poor, we didn't have enough beds, so we'd always be in each other's faces, right? We'd always argue and fight. Then as we got older, we'd all get our own lives, we'd come back for Christmas, you know. That's our Thanksgiving, really. We come back for Christmas, and inevitably we'd fight a little bit, you know, we'd never kill each other. just argue like people do, families. And when we talk on the phone, you know, Julie would criticize Polly and Polly would criticize Janet and I'd criticize Tony, inevitably. But generally speaking, there was a very strong bond. So we never broke into schisms. We didn't have schisms. But it's curious, the last 20 plus years, I would say, maybe more now. I don't know really how it started. They're all got good ethics, all of them. There's become this agreement between us, an unspoken agreement now, that we do not say bad words about each other to each other. And that's stupendous in families. That's pretty amazing, you know. And when we're together, because we're all very volatile, all speedy and bossy people, like, you know, our brother, is the seventh, he's the quietest in the family. He'd have to be, the poor thing, with 7 bossy sisters, 6 bossy sisters. Anyway, when we're together, which is quite often, you know, we do not fight. So all I can tell you is, then it's proof. This is proof to me that if you control your speech, and look at us, mostly speech, you know, if we control our speech when we're around each other, it's a miracle. So the happiness, and that's between us as a collective group, that there's harmony, and we even actually praise each other now to each other, you know, and that's not that easy in families. There's old junky stuff in families, but it's been a conscious effort. That's, forget about karma, forget about future lives. It's the effort in this actual life. You know, you can see the immediate, but there's more peace as a collective group, you know, more peace between us, more happiness between us, therefore more kindness and more love. It's so clear. And speech, I think we could spend the rest of the day on speech. Something about speech in our culture, we completely pay no attention to it. I mean, you can get arrested for stealing $5. You could scream abuse at somebody for 1 hour and you're not breaking the law. Maybe these days you might, I don't know. Or you could lie. I remember one time, you know, there's 2 different people, one in America and one in Australia. Both of them, one was a man, one's a woman, and they both pretended to be monks and nuns, and they were both totally delusional. But they led people up garden paths. They were very charismatic with their mouths, you know. So the nun in Australia, she pretended to be a nun. She was not. She was a complete, total, really quite insane person. Every word that came out of her mouth was a lie. She was quite mentally ill, you know. But people believed her. So one person who was kind of misled by her, got really upset and was misused and misled by her, went to the police. And the police said, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. If she steals $5, yes, we'll arrest her then. Something like that, you know. So we don't count speech as important. But speech is just stupendous. And if we can even just have the morality, the ethics of one day at a time controlling our speech. Okay, some people have good discipline and don't have some karma to be a disciplined person and doesn't have out of control speech. Maybe that person's got to start talking more because, you know, whatever reason. But generally, uncontrolled speech is so heavy. And we all know as soon as the words are out the mouth, you cannot bring them back. It's done. The damage is done. And that's often what indeed among families causes so, I mean, I know families that are broken into 3 different groups, you know, and it's so bitter and painful. If we can control our speech, this is already stupendous. And remember the point that I'm talking about our family as a group recipient of the benefit, but you are the beneficiary. You are the beneficiary. This is the point, the simple point in the first stages of practice that Buddha's trying to prove. Forget, like I said, forget even long-term. And I mean, long-term for karma, there's no question. The Buddha's analysis is this. If you want happiness in the next life, after this one, what you've got to practice is good ethics. You must stop killing, stealing, lying, do the 7 non-virtues and live in vows and do purification. Then guaranteed when you die, you'll get a really good life. And he'll give all the reasons and the logical reasons exactly what kind of life you'll have. Forget that one. Forget that one. Just now. Now, you know, right now, it can easily to be proved. You look at other people who are happy. I don't mean happy, you know, I mean more genuinely, deeply happy, meaning peaceful, is because they're virtuous, they're kind, they're loving, they're patient, they're compassionate, they help other people. We can see this, you know, this can be proved, but we've got to prove that my virtue benefits my mind. That's the point. Of course, it's not easy because our minds are uncontrolled. And also because if we're really trying to practice, this is a hard one for us. We all think our mind is getting worse. They even say in the classical texts, in the Indian texts, on the in the teachings on the instructions of how to get single-pointed concentration, which, as you know, is divided into 9 stages of cultivation. And in the classical text, they even say that one of the signs of success of having begun to accomplish the first of the 9 stages. A sign of success is that you think your mind's getting worse. No, it's because we're paying attention to it. So our tragedy in our culture, we only notice what is happening in our mind when it's vomiting out the mouth. That's why quiet people who have disciplined speech have to wait till they're depressed in bed and inert and can't move before they realize something's wrong. But those of us who shout and yell, we've got to catch it before we kill somebody. But we mostly, because we're so addicted to our bodies and our physical feelings, we're so addicted to that as a criterion of whether you're happy or not. We don't notice what's going on in our mind, our thoughts, until the body feels it. That's our big, big mistake. And that's one of the great things we can learn from the Buddha. Learning these meditation techniques where you pay attention to your mind. Don't wait for the physical feeling to come. But that's our biggest mistake in our culture, I would say. We don't notice what's happening until we're screaming or until we're inert in bed with depression. This is our biggest mistake. And that's when we go to the therapist. If you're feeling fairly quiet and you feel a little bit of upset in your mind and you think, I better go to the therapist to get some techniques, she'll tell you to shut up and go home. The therapist only wants you to come when you want to kill somebody or yourself. I mean, I'm being sarcastic here, get my point. So peaceful, in the third category, in the neutral states of mind, they call them neutral, I call them mechanics. You've got attention, intention, discrimination, mindfulness, concentration, vigilance. There are many of these. And there's the point about these is they're neither in their character negative, neurotic, deluded, non-virtuous, nor are they virtuous, virtuous, positive. These have got very specific meanings in Buddhist psychology, states of mind. That's why they say that they're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, which sounds to us like they're indifferent. No, they're super powerful states of mind that anybody needs to function properly. But they don't have this character of being virtuous or non-virtuous. And that's something that's unique to the Buddhist approach. We've really got to understand what he means psychologically when he talks like this, when the model talks this way. So in that category, this is what's curious. In that category, there's the one that's called simply feeling. Now, if you read the Heart Sutra, many times you hear the teaching, you're going to hear this feeling keep popping up. Another one called discrimination. They're mentioned continuously. So feeling, what does it refer to? It's not the way we use it as synonymous with emotions. You've only got, as I said before, 3 kinds. Those that are pleasant or happy, and there's a spectrum, mildly happy to the most intense joy. Then you've got those that are unpleasant or suffering, mildly unpleasant to the most intense nightmarish torture. And then you've got those that are neutral. They are valid, but we just don't worry about those. We couldn't care about those here. So we obviously know we want the pleasant ones. That's what's called happiness. But this is already confusing because when we say happiness, we immediately think the thing that we think causes it, the cake, the event, the person, we're obsessed with the outside. This is not Buddha's concern. He doesn't argue, and this is the point where we have to be very clear, logical. He doesn't argue that the cake doesn't play a role. He doesn't argue with that. If the cake plays a role, it does in your happy feelings. Or the boyfriend doesn't play a role. Yes, he does. But his point is they are secondary. They're like catalysts. They're not the main cause. This is the crucial point. And we've got to prove this to ourselves, So in the long-term goal, in the long-term view of karma, the method for waking up next life to have a happy rebirth, that is to say with a decent human body, with a good mummy and a good daddy, with money in the bank and nice food in the fridge and a lovely house and a nice neighborhood with unpolluted water and air and food, a lovely environment and a good school and lovely education and all the lovely things of life. What are the causes of them? Very clear. Non-killing, non-stealing, non-lying, generosity, etc., etc. So the long-term morality and ethics is the method to get a happy future life. But what we're discussing here, which is perfect for people who are secular, non-Buddhist, people who have no interest in future lives, the method for getting happy feelings now, to trigger them, to cultivate, is to trigger them, is this practice of being ethical, of being kind, of not killing, of not, first of all, with your body and speech, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. Immediately, it won't bring happy feelings. If you're addicted to lying, it's going to be extremely painful to change that habit. It won't bring happy feelings immediately, but it'll certainly make your environment more pleasing. If you stop lying to everybody, you're going to start getting more fun from people, you know, in that way. So the two things, so the key one I'm saying, the key one, and I made the second point briefly about karma, but the first one, if you like, and I use my family as an example, if you want happy relationships, control your body and control your speech, you know. You know, I said quite a few things, 30 minutes. Now I think you need to ask me some questions as a starting point. Come on, ask me some questions. If anybody has any. But the key thing I'm saying behind this is if we really want to be serious in our study, we've got to learn this model of the mind. We've got to learn what it means. What is anger? What is jealousy? What is love? What is concentration? Where do they fit into this model? It really is extremely helpful because, I mean, we all got our own definitions of these words, but if we don't fit them into the Buddhist model, it's just very vague language, very vague talk, you know. So come on, ask me some questions, please.
I have a question.
Good, Cynthia.
Hi, thank you so much.
Good, darling.
Is that possible as you move, you change, as you start to watch your speech, your mind, your body behavior, that your karma, you notice the change throughout life? Sometimes look like you have a karma with something, and then all of a sudden your life changes and gets better, let's say. It brings more happiness in somehow.
Yeah.
You know, you move into
okay, yes, Cynthia, it's a good point. So it doesn't always follow logically. Okay, this is an interesting point now. It doesn't always follow logically. It doesn't always follow that when you're being virtuous and kind, that things will always change for the better. Sometimes they change for the worse first. But I think generally speaking, we can certainly say that. Like I said, my example of my with my family, because just this particular example, where before we would have been fighting and a bit kind of talking behind backs, now we consciously don't do that. So when we are together, it definitely has changed for the better. There's no question. And the way to put that is, I think if you're doing virtuous actions, one of the results can be that it can ripen previous virtuous karmic seeds that will then cause nice things to happen. But I think, Cynthia, also we can probably see, like if I've got some friends in prison, I've got to say some friends in prison who are, you know, who are living in a garbage dump around awful people and are treated very badly, but they are still happy because they've worked on their mind. So the most fundamental one the Buddha's making, when you work on your mind, even if the outside environment is really terrible, you can still learn to be happy. That probably is the fundamental one, you know, that's the fundamental one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got a friend on death row. He's been there 30 years. He's really worked on himself. I've known him for 25 years. He's an incredibly devoted Buddhist, amazing human being who really helps other people. Whenever he writes, if you read his letters, you would never know he lived on death row in a garbage dump prison in Kentucky. You would never know that, because how he talks, he's funny, he's light, he cracks jokes, he talks about his friends. You would just think he's this happy guy, you know, but he's living in this garbage dump, getting close to his death date. So the fundamental point is the real method for getting happy, no matter the external conditions, is your mind. Absolutely. But your point is also a good one. Yes. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, darling. And of course, the point the Buddha is making is the hardest one. It's the most difficult one, because we're so addicted to believing I'll be happy when I get off death row. Many of my friends in prison feel that way. They're always miserable because they're in prison. The logic being, oh, in this garbage dump, how can I be happy? This is the one that's really we have to prove to ourselves is not necessarily true. We can learn to be happy no matter what. And happy means having virtuous thoughts and doing virtuous actions. That's morality, you know, and that absolutely brings peace and happiness. That's the logic Buddha's saying, and we've got to prove that to ourselves. That's the hardest one. What else, people? Any other questions? Catherine, hello, darling. You got a question? No? Okay, don't worry. Anybody else? Jennifer, you got a question?
You know, Venerable, yes, I do have a question. I'm a little scared to ask you, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay, Jennifer, come on, darling.
And not because you're you, but because of the question. So I went through a bad breakup, And I thought that perhaps we would be able to reconcile at least as friends, but okay, try to make it a question so that you don't get angry. If I already know about Vajrasattva practice, I've already made, you know, regretted my actions. The family talks about me behind my back. It's not looking good, you know, even now after 8 months, there's still like bad mojo going on. Does my daily practice of doing water bowls and Vajrasattva, will that help purify me so that I can finally get rid of all the emotional baggage that I have over this? And so that
darling, I hear
my path for something better.
I hear you, Jennifer. I hear two things. I hear that right now you're the baddie. People are, because I mean, you must have initiated the breakup. Is that right?
Yeah, I asked to move out. Yes.
So then people are blaming you for the breakup. You're the naughty girl, are you, at the moment?
Well, I'm a naughty girl because when there were things going wrong, I asked if we could talk about it. And I'm like you, I'm kind of a fiery person. And everybody else are kind of hippies and like, you know, they don't really say a whole lot.
Okay, so you sort of opened up the can of worms.
Yeah, I opened it
Okay,
up.
so fine. So listen to me, darling. There's two things I'm hearing. One is that, you know, people are blaming you. So, but the other thing is, I haven't yet heard what bad thing you did. I mean, why should breaking up a relationship be considered negative? What naughty things have you done? I don't understand.
Well, I just, in their eyes, I was just an angry person who
I know,
had
but I'm
too much
asking
to
you,
say.
sweetheart.
Oh.
You talked about, can all my practice help me purify my negative actions? Of course, in general, they will, but you just simply said that you initiated a breakup because of various reasons. Did you have a good motivation for that breakup, or were you angry?
I wasn't angry, but we weren't getting along, and it seemed better for everybody.
Okay, so then you've done, I can't see that you've done anything wrong. So why do you assume you've done something wrong? So in other words, what I think you're doing, Jennifer, which is what we all tend to do, because we have such deep attachment to be seen as a good girl, when we're not seen as a good girl, we assume that we're not a good girl, but that's not logical. Do you hear my point?
I hear your point.
So you really need to distinguish between how people see you and is their view true or not? This is a hugely important point, Jennifer. So from what you told me, you had a good motivation for the breakup. So that's nothing negative. What's negative about that? That's a very intelligent thing to do. So that so already by them shouting at you and blaming you, you're purifying plenty at the moment, being seen as a naughty girl. So you have to learn to live with that and know that it does not mean Jennifer is a naughty girl. Meanwhile, you keep doing your practice and be happy. Are we communicating?
We are communicating. Thank you.
Good, good, good. It's a really major point, actually. I mean, we are so addicted, all of us. You're not just you, Jennifer. We are so, and this is a whole down. This is now you can close off again, Jennifer. But it's another whole point. I think we're so, you know, like let's say just recently I was talking to a friend who's helping her mum. Her mum is old and her mum is cranky. Like lots of our mums are cranky. Join the universe. We're cranky people, and she's trying to help her mummy, you know. And mummy just is on at her and negative and critical and shouting at her and demanding from her. And of course, the daughter's exhausted because we've got a very strong karma with our mummies, haven't we? We know that. And so, of course, we were discussing this very point. Since she was a little girl, mummy was always criticizing. Mummy was never happy. So she was always, all her life, so deeply instinctive in all of us, trying to win her mummy's love. So this is the point I'm getting at. Because she didn't, whatever she tried to do to help her mother, even now when she's old again, still her mother's not happy. So it's just like with Jennifer, because her mother's not happy, she has taken it upon herself to think, therefore, I am not a good person. This is our worst mistake. This is so much of the suffering we have on this planet. In other words, the reason we suffer so terribly when people don't like us or criticize us, no matter how hard we try to be good to them, we take that upon ourselves and we assume they must be right. So we think I must be a bad person. This is our worst mistake. This is the most tragic mistake, and it comes from attachment to reputation. That's the term they use. And it's the most instinctive attachment of all, the most primordial, the last one to go. I always tell this story, there's some saying about the yogi up in the mountains who's given up everything, given up sex, drugs, rock and roll, everything, but they're still thinking about what the people in the village at the bottom of the mountain are thinking about him. This is the deepest attachment of all, and it pervades our minds, and it's so hard to see the suffering that this causes. That's why if we get criticized a lot, we go mad. Just because of this attachment. So to be able to be truly developed in ourselves, to truly be content with who we are, no matter what people say about us, that's a pretty highly realized person, I tell you. But this is what we have to practice. This is huge, because we all yearn to be seen and approved of and liked and stroked by others. This is the deepest attachment we have. This is very powerful, I tell you. And this is since we're little children, since we're born. It's a huge one. So of course it's marvelous, it's wonderful when we can love each other in return and be nourished by each other. It's so delicious, you know. But if we're not being, if you keep trying to help your mother and you assume you're failing all the time because she shows she's not happy, that is wrong. You've done everything in your power to help your mother, and you will continue to do it, but stop expecting her to be happy. That's her job. You can want to make someone happy. This is a big point. Compassion and love are the wish to make others happy, but their ability to be happy is from their side. This is something stupendously important. I cannot tell you. We'll go mad otherwise. We'll go completely out of our brain, you know. So what else, people? Questions? Other questions? Yes, darling Catherine.
Now I have a question.
Good on you, girl. Happy to do.
So is there any way to know whether when you're experiencing a result of something, it's just because it was time for that karma to ripen, or it's because you intentionally, specifically have been working on purifying that particular thing?
Oh, I think it's both. This is why the seeds and the fruits one is such a good analogy. You're doing your weeding. That's your practice every day. And then tomorrow, you didn't realize that there was already a seed in there from a flower that had not yet ripened because there was no space. But by pulling out the weeds today, you've given space for this flower to pop up tomorrow. So the karma was there to experience it, but by purifying it, you hastened its fruit. Equally can happen with negative things the same way. In other words, let's say you start stealing today, then tomorrow you get stolen from, and we make the mistake of thinking my stealing today is the main cause of being stolen from tomorrow. But no, that being stolen from was there already in your ground, but you stealing today encouraged the growth of it. So it's exactly both. Your practice is what hastens, and that's how we get happy in this life. We've got all these seeds to be happy and seeds for things to go well. So by practicing, you nourish those seeds, and that's why good things happen. That's why good things happen. So you can start practicing generosity, let's say, and then suddenly tomorrow you might win the lottery. Your being generous isn't the direct cause of winning the lottery, but the seed to win the lottery was already there from 52 lives ago, but your being generous now kind of nourished that seed. It's like that, Catherine.
That's interesting because, thinking of negative things that happened to me,
yeah.
I can look at it as like, well, I planted that seed, here it is. But this thing, like you just said, another way to look at it is because of the positive work that I do in this life,
yes,
is what caused it to happen,
because
now when I can deal with it, it sucks, I don't like it, but I can deal with it and, look at it in a way which is probably healthier. Instead of getting angry and perpetrating the,
It's so true. This is a huge one, Catherine. So just like I said, in the same way that your being generous today can nourish your seeds from past generosity to get rich tomorrow, equally by practicing today, that can also hasten, which is exactly what you're saying, the ripening of suffering experiences. Mm-hmm. So this is something, it's like, that's why I use the analogy of going to the gym. You're sitting there comfortable, relaxed, watching television, feeling no pain. And one day you start going to the gym. Well, you come home with pain. You got home with muscles you didn't know you had. So you're not going to freak out and go to the doctor because you know that it's a good pain. It's a sign of progress. And that's the hardest one for us to take, Catherine, for our minds. I know I always use the example of one of our monks, Roger, Australian monk, not Lama Zopa's Roger, another one. Years and years doing intensive retreats, 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats. And he told me years ago that at some point after many retreats, he was out of his brain with extra levels of rage and kind of really gone crazy, mental suffering, not so much physical. And he was so distressed, and he went to Lama Zopa, and Rinpoche laughed and laughed and said, fantastic, the dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. And I think this is a major one for everybody who's trying to practice. We're all going to the gym, so we're feeling pain and muscles we didn't know. We've got to interpret it properly. So in other words, the other point is this. There's a huge difference between experiencing rage, which is old junk coming up, and actually actively being angry. So let's say, you know, I come to you and you're my friend, and I'm angry with my boyfriend. I'm angry with Lou, and I'm consciously being angry, and you're encouraging me. Yeah, isn't he a creep? I don't know how you can stand him. So that's called being angry, and I'm creating heavy negative karma. But let's say I'm working on my mind and I come to you and I'm crying, Lou this and Lou that. But the reason I'm doing it is to understand my anger and to try and work with it. That's not quote unquote being angry. That's called practice. We have to see the difference. But just that we're so scared of our minds sometimes, we're so scared of delusions being there, we freak out, you know. But we've got to understand the way to interpret what's in our mind, to not be scared of it. That's another whole discussion anyway. But yes, Catherine, exactly the point. What else, you darling people? Other questions? These are such good points.
I have a question, Venerable Robina.
Yes, Sarah, talk to me, sweetheart.
Hello from Melbourne. It's good to see
yeah,
you.
Because it's winter. I thought, what's she doing in a coat? Because she's in Melbourne. It's in Australia. It's winter there.
It's freezing. It's very Melbourne. I just been sort of thinking about what you've been saying and about right speech and harsh words to others, and I understand that. But what about harsh words for ourselves? I assume the practice is the same. Is that, can we, it's a moral action to catch ourselves before we...
Good, it's really good point, Sarah. Okay, so let's look at the, first of all, kind of very clinically. There's levels of negativity, like there's levels of positivity. So obviously an action that, this is what they call a complete action, a negative action, and a positive one too. A negative action that includes another, that's the heaviest, because it's not just you're harming yourself by being angry, but you're also harming the other person. So that makes that action heavier for you. Now, this self-hate that we have, I remember one time the Dalai Lama heard about it and he said, that's a mental illness. He was so shocked. I mean, it is quite specific to the modern people. We have incredible self-hate. And what it is actually, if we understand attachment, we're born with attachment, and the consequence of past attachment practice is that we're dissatisfied. The energy of attachment is dissatisfaction. We can't see that. We just see the hunger and always wanting something more. It's because we're not satisfied with what we've got. But the real deep dissatisfaction we tend to have is with ourself, and that's what we mean by self-hate. So we love to hate ourselves. So of course it's the opposite of good ethics. Of course it is. Absolutely, it's totally self-destructive. It's totally, utterly tragic. And that's one of our worst diseases in the modern world. We love to hate ourselves, and we really think it's a virtue to think we're no good, you know. It's just, and it destroys us. So that, but nevertheless, you can be a patient person, Sarah, and not get angry with other people, just with yourself. Well, I would get angry with another person and harm myself. So I was like double trouble. So if you're not even harming others, at least that's fantastic. So then we've got to learn to see if we can try and change our mind and start. And that's why it's so important. And we think it's so corny to start having positive thoughts. I mean, it's so funny. One person in one class we're discussing, we all the time hear all the negative thoughts never stopping, and we try to stop them. And then we were discussing about how we can proactively have positive thoughts. And she was so shocked. She said, I've never thought of that. And we don't think of it. We just wait for the thoughts to come. The negative ones seem to come whether you like them or not. You don't invite them. You don't consciously think, oh, well, what can I think bad today? They come pouring in, but we have to consciously have positive thoughts because we forget. And this is a profound practice. But it's not comfortable, because if we think we're no good, and it's deeply ingrained in all of us because of dissatisfaction, we almost feel embarrassed to even say a positive thought about ourselves, but we have to do it. It's unbelievably powerful practice. It's incredible. And of course, we won't believe it initially. Go on.
No, I hear you, and thank you for that. I needed to hear it. But I also, it's catching it, also reinforcing positive thoughts to counteract the negative thoughts that come in about ourselves. Should we also be purifying at the end of the day when we're doing a purification practice, or reflecting in the same ways that we would if we had harmed someone else with our speech? Would we, is it possible to do that for ourselves?
Okay, there's no doubt about that. But my feeling is it's not even speech; it's only thoughts with ourselves. We don't shout it. Yeah. We don't shout. So that's, you see, there's a quite distinct karma of speech, which includes the mind, and there's an action including the mind of the body. But the mind is just the mind. So they are negative, and we're programming our mind with rubbish. So of course, when we do our regret, we should regret the negative of the body and the speech, and I regret my anger at myself and my self-hate and my depression. They're so ridiculous. Of course, it's exactly the same. We must, Sarah. Absolutely. Okay. We must. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you
so much.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Yes. Jennifer.
Along the lines of what she just said, Venerable. So let's say I'm still emotional about the situation that I'm in, and I'm being flooded with really bad thoughts about how I'm never going to find another love and love this person so much, yada, yada, yada. And I end up on the floor crying. I really can't sit on the cushion and try to work with my thoughts at that moment. So can I just say the Vajrasattva short mantra, or like Chenrezig short mantra?
Jennifer, do whatever you can, sweetheart. Do whatever you can. Even just having one little tiny mantra in the middle of all the rage and the despair is like,
that's what I'm saying.
Nectar. It's like nectar on your heart, darling. Of course.
Great. Thank you.
Reasonable with yourself.
It's hard, but thank you.
I know it is, sweetheart. Yes.
Thanks.
That's fantastic. And try to feel the blessings of the Buddha, while you're weeping in despair. It's okay. Good, darling. Who else, people? Come on. Who else is there? Always good questions. Questions is the best, I tell you. Brings up all the topics. Who else is there?
Hi there, I have a question.
Where's I? I'm trying to see which eye it is.
I'm here, Layla. Here, let me turn on my camera. It's kind of dark here.
I'm trying to see your picture. Hang on a minute.
I'm right here. Hi.
Oh, there you are. I see you, Layla. Good, sweetheart.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Hi. So in terms of a complete karmic action for right speech, and if it's towards myself, would the negative thought be the complete karmic action?
I'm a bit lost, darling. Say it another way for me.
So if I'm thinking about if a karmic action has to have the intention and the behavior or the something that I do because of that, if I'm thinking negative things about myself or bad things about myself, where's the complete action? Is it just...
It's not a complete. It's not a complete. I mean, there can be complete actions of body, speech, and mind. So there would be an intention to have the thought. You see, okay, there's the intention. But it doesn't work like this. They just these negative thoughts seem to come flooding, And even if we harm ourselves physically, it almost feels like it's beyond intention because the habits are so deep and the self-loathing is so deep. So, I mean, a complete action has to have an object. And that means a person, a sentient being. And so in that sense, it's not a complete action insofar as it will be a cause of a lower realm rebirth. But it will be certainly if you have intention and you hate yourself and someone says you're not really a creep, Layla, and you'll say, I am a creep and I would rather think I'm a creep, you be quiet, and you consciously, but I mean, the habit is so strong. That's what drives us. It's sort of like you don't really want the intention. So, but the negative speech, but the negative thoughts, they do leave imprints. Of course they do, but this is why we've got to try and counteract them. But there's no real, I don't think it's a complete action of that. There's not a complete, unless of course, I mean, even when they talk about killing yourself, that includes an action of the body and you take the pill and you kill yourself out of self-loathing, let's say. Still, it's not exactly the same karma as killing because there's no other person. There's still the karma there, but it's not quite the same qualitatively. So it's not as, any action we do just to harm ourselves is never as strong as an action that harms another. In other words, the same with a virtuous action. As soon as another person's involved, it's much more powerful, isn't it? Do you see? Yeah, thank you, Lama. Good, darling. What else, people? Anna, it's middle of the night for you, babe. 2 in the morning for Anna. 3 in the morning. Look at you. You just because you go to bed late, or you just decide to stay up? Whatever.
Hello, Venerable. No, I went to bed early and so could get up to attend.
Good on you, darling. Do you have any points to bring up, Anna? Any questions? You're doing pretty well these days.
I think I'm burning off some karma epically, and I'm coming across more and more some texts about transforming and rejoicing in my sufferings and the burning off of karma. You know, if I'm burning off so much, if I could turn it around 180, I mean, I'd be deliriously happy. So right. I'm trying to, you know, trying to practice that. Yeah, well done, and I do feel and see the benefit of going through these emotional wobbles, whatever's going on, coming out the other end. My mind seems clearer each and every time. Good. It's tough. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It's not for the faint-hearted.
You know, I mean, this is the one, you know, our ability to handle suffering is the key to whether we go crazy or become happy. And this is something so interesting. Recently, if somebody emailed me, said, good point, Anna, thank you. Somebody emailed me and talked about a book by some fellow who did research about people during the war, the Nazis, you know, the Auschwitz, the people who suffered. And he, from his own observation, I can't think of this man's name, some philosopher, from his own observation, that those, and I'm putting it in my words, who had more flexible minds were able to survive the suffering and didn't go crazy. But the ones who didn't, they're the ones who went crazy. So the way of putting it in Buddhist terms is people who have got more access to, because they found meaning. That's right. The ones, even though this intense suffering, they were able to find meaning in life. And they're the ones who had more kindness and more love, and their lives were successful. So that's exactly the same as my friends in prison. Those who go completely crazy, I mean, there's no way they can find a way to interpret it as good. They can't find a learning in it, you know. And so basically the way to put that is when attachment and anger are running the show, we go mad. And that we can see no way out of it. But if we've got more patience and more kindness and more love and more forgiveness and more virtue, more ethics, then we are sane. Then we can handle. Then we can manage. It's really clear, you know. Time and time again, we see that with some people we know in our lives, people we read about. It's the same. So their ability to find a way to see good in the suffering, Anna, is pretty incredible. I mean, it's not meant to be masochistic, it's just intelligent. That's why I always quote my friend Sunny, who lived for years in a cell on her own, on death row, accused of murdering 2 policemen with her husband, and they were totally innocent. The husband even got executed. His head burst into flames when they killed him, and she was at the execution. You can't imagine the nightmares, but she had this ability to see it differently. She had an ability to see the good. That's the miracle. And that's the real practice of like mental ethics. It's incredible. But oh my goodness, it's hard. Because everything in our being, Anna, isn't it? We only want happy feelings, don't we? We only want everything to be lovely. Jennifer, the same. We only want everyone to like us and to things to be lovely. It's so painful when things go wrong. But this is when we become incredibly strong and powerful. If we can't stop it, I mean, the Buddha says, if you can change something, please change it. But what if you can't? That's the test. That's when the work happens, you know. And that's when our minds become flexible. And that's really the practice of dependent arising, understanding emptiness, that nothing has an intrinsic nature as this or that. We can learn to call it something different. This is the miracle. And that's what my friend Sunny said. They couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I am not a prisoner. I am a monk. I am not in a cell. I'm in a cave. She called it something different. It sounds so cute, but it's beyond profound, you know. It's only when our minds are rigid, this is wrong. No matter what happens, you can't see it in another way. I remember His Holiness one time was asked, how do we put emptiness into practice in daily life? And it was so simple, his answer. He said, try to see things from another point of view. This is beyond profound, you know. It's amazing. So hard, though. What else, people? It's only gone 1 hour. We're so used to having hour sessions. Maybe we should stop now. But if you have more questions, an hour is always enough. But we can have 90 minutes, I don't mind. Brian in LA, how are you? You doing all right? Good, darling. Happy to see you. Any questions, anybody?
Hi, Robina, me again.
Yes, talk to me, sweetheart.
So it's not a question, but kind of an observation from what you just said. I have this tendency to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Well,
like, and always, I can frame it in a context, but the thing is, that seems to annoy a lot of people because they want to be able to blame someone, and say, oh, that person's bad. And I'm always like, well, yeah, but you don't really know, maybe they just had a bad day, or maybe that, I say that. And then I can tell that that person's getting annoyed because I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of, pointing the finger at someone and labeling them bad or whatever. I just think that's kind of, funny, interesting.
I think it's a very good point, Catherine. I think it's amazing. I think it's wonderful. Thank you, Jane. I just saw your message, Jane. You're exactly right. That's the fellow. Thank you, Jane. Yes, it's very fascinating, Catherine. That's a very good quality. It's a marvelous quality. Just sort of see things from another point of view. And that's really what sanity, that's what kindness is. That's what sanity is. That's what not being angry is. Anger is very rigid and fixed. It is that. And it's rooted in self-existence, isn't it? It's so clear.
It's just interesting that other people
get upset with it.
Yes.
Annoyed with you, sort of Pollyanna. Shut up, Catherine.
Yeah, like why are you always, so, I don't know. They want me to be angry along with, it's like
that's exactly right.
The bandwagon kind of
that's
thing.
True. It's so true. It's very interesting, Catherine. It's a very good point. Thank you, darling. Thank you for that. So what else, people? Ask me some questions. Come on. I'm happy to talk for hours. I can, I promise, but I want questions. How's everything with COVID-19 and COVID in Melbourne, Sarah? It's a bit bad in Australia at the moment, isn't it? Everyone's locking down. I mean, we've only got about 200 cases in the only got about 200 cases in the whole country, but they've got these absolutely strict rules in Australia. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's a civil war in America if it happened, I promise you.
Yes, it's our 6th lockdown. So I'm in lockdown and thought I was scrolling your teaching schedule, so I thought I would join because otherwise I would be filled with lots of anxiety that is whipped up, I think,
I understand exactly.
Over here.
Yes, I understand.
I have a sort of a question. I haven't quite formulated it yet, but I guess I'll think it through. I guess it's around, and it's still on the thoughts thing, I guess, and thinking about not pushing away negative thoughts, but pushing them away with not productive thoughts, like scrolling, or just being, you talked about mindfulness being one of the states of mind that is, one of the mechanics of mind and things like that. I'm aware I need to pose a question, so I'm still just thinking it through, but I think I have a real problem with, I think my therapist said to me, some people drink to push away fear. Some people do drugs to push away fear. And some people just fill their mind with stuff or are very busy to push away fear and things. So I'm just sort of been thinking about that a lot this week.
Are you talking about thoughts popping up and you don't want to deal with them, and so you just make them go away and think other things? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. But it's not even conscious, I think, some of the time. It's just a habit that I don't that I know I don't enjoy, and I want to be more.
I think it's different things, Sarah. Okay, first of all, the starting point from in the discussion we're having here is the assumption is that we're trying to become conscious. So I'm assuming you are trying to become conscious. You're trying to become aware, aren't you, of your body, speech, and mind. So that's what practice is. So that is amazing. So given that, then there's many approaches to what goes on in our mind. First of all, given that our minds are uncontrolled as old reverberations from endless past thinking, that we get born with it. Even as children, if you've got a busy mind from past lives, it's just going to start pouring out. So there's that kind of stuff that's just completely impulsive, that they're uninvited thoughts. There's just uncontrolled berserk thoughts piling up from the past. So there's those. Then there's, and one of our approaches to those when we understand the way the mind is, it's uncontrolled because we've not learned concentration, then part of our approach is, if we've studied the Buddhist model, we know there's a thing called negative ones, positive ones, blah, blah. So we've got that analysis. So then one of the approaches is, we can't deal with every thought as it arises. I think even in modern psychology, they say there are like 1,000 thoughts a second. That's a fact. So there's no way you can handle every one. There's no way you can control everyone. You will go mad if you try. So one of the major approaches is, you notice the thoughts, and they may be completely crazy thoughts. One of our major practices is to allow them to come and go. Allow them to come, but we take it's like 1,000 visitors all trying to get in your door and all coming in and crowding your room, and you're trying to understand every single one of them, and you're going crazy trying to deal with them all. You don't have to. One of the major ones is to allow them to be there, and that means not buying into the story. But our problem is, if the mind is crazy, we buy into that story. If you're a bit depressed, I am bad and I am hopeless and life is a disaster, and we buy into it, and before you know it, you're inert on the bed. Or if you're angry, you're vomiting out all the words. So one of the major practices, and this is very scary, is to allow, it's like 1,000 roommates and they're all shouting, let them be there. Notice them, but don't believe their story. Know they are only thoughts, and don't follow them. That's the major practice. In other words, when you begun to got that, you could be having the most terrible thoughts, really having a hard time, but because you're observing them and you're not having a panic attack, someone would see you, they'd think you're just being happy, smiley Sarah. They would never know. But it's becoming aware. That's one of the major ones. And we tend to sort of lock into every thought and take them seriously and then go crazy. Now, another time, it might be important, it's necessary, if you're starting to feel yourself getting angry over something that's happening right this minute, then you can be your own therapist and argue with it. Catch it before it gets too strong. Give it a break, Sarah. Shut up. Give the man a break. It's only my old cranky father. He doesn't mean it. Give him a break. And you cut it, you nip it in the bud.
That was my next question. So if we're noticing a thought, like for one that's very recurrent for me, is that I'm not good at my work, which is, there's no evidence of that. I actually, do very well at my work, and I've just had a performance review with glowing reviews from my bosses, but I have incredible imposter syndrome. So when I catch that, is that a one, particularly when it's recurring, that I should absolutely just let go, or should I sort of look at it and say, look, and kind of rationalize it, or be like, there's no evidence for that, or I
think that kind of thoughts, when there's a clear distinction between the reality, which you've proven, and your own thoughts, and this is very common for all of us, Sarah, you really got to argue with those and train your mind to think differently, and they'll keep coming, but so let them also just be there and don't pay attention to them, but also sometimes do active therapy with them, active discussion, and write down the logic, because we've all got that. Everybody, you speak to any human being on the planet, I mean, even the one, especially the people we idealize, like Hollywood stars. I remember reading, I saw a documentary of Audrey Hepburn, who on the face of it seemed a completely beautiful, kind, her voice was kind, her whole manner was kind, everybody adored her. And there she was, the same as everybody else. My nose is too long, and I'm too fat, and I'm too this, and I'm too that. Everybody, this is the irony of ego, that we have this, I mean, people talk, what's that word we use when people, anorexics, think they're fat? I'm not being rude about people. There's a word, just one of those fancy
body dysmorphia.
That one. We've all got it, darling. We've all got it. If we wrote down the description of ourselves and then someone else did, we would never know we're talking about the same person. Everybody's got it to some degree. It's the irony of attachment. It's the irony of dissatisfaction. And this is where it's so strong now in our culture. I'm not being rude or anything, but we're not only dissatisfied with the way our mind is, we're not even dissatisfied with our nose, we're even dissatisfied with our gender, the intense suffering of coming into this life. And we've got the means to change our gender now, but it's just, and I mean, sometimes it's just profound dissatisfaction with every atom of our being. It's not criticizing anybody. It's just the way samsara is, we have so much dissatisfaction with ourselves. It's just, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, thank you. It's really helped me to think of that negative thought process as I've written down, start having positive thoughts, and to think about it as a more, active, counteractive practice, but also a practice of ethics, of ethical conduct, to think of.
Absolutely.
I would never say these things to anyone else, so why should I say them to myself?
Precisely, darling. I swear
I'm going to think think
Yeah.
about that a bit more.
And this is where, if you know, like certainly in the Tibetan tradition, where you take an empowerment into one of the Buddhas, like Chenrezig, and they're such marvelous practices because they are helping us train our minds. They call it divine pride. You actually are cultivating a view that I am Chenrezig, I am a perfected being. You practice, and it's almost too shocking to think this, but this is a marvelous practice. I know when Lama Yeshe first met all the hippies in the 70s, he was so shocked at the self-loathing he saw. And this is why he started teaching these practices from day one and trying to get us to see and identify with our good qualities. I am actually got all this, even if you see it as potential, it's very powerful, but it's almost, we're so stubborn. No, I can't be Tara. No, not possible. No, 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 you know, but it's very beneficial. This divine pride. It's a lovely way of putting it. And that's where I think even if you mix that with also compassion, and you think, you know, normally when we're so self-conscious, let's say, and we think of ourselves walking down the street and we're imagining everybody looking at us, or people at work, whatever your trip is, you know, I mean, if we can try and think of ourselves, this is a compassion one, try and think of ourselves as being there for others. So to make yourself look lovely, and to be conscious that when you're with other people, you're there for their sake. That can be very counteracting to the fragile sense of self, you know. It's another type of practice. It's a very interesting one. I remember Grace Kelly, before she was even a Buddhist, before I was a Buddhist, I remember hearing her say, of course I have to look beautiful. People have to look at me. I think that's very profound. I'm not trying to put any sort of meaning into what she said other than that. Instead of, oh, I'm this big fat lump of me and I'm ugly and everybody's staring at me. So yes, people are staring at you, but so be a lovely person to stare at, you know, and think you're there for them. It can be a counteracting thing as well. It's very nice. Thank you, people.
Thank you.
What else, darling? Okay, darling. Thank you so much, Sarah. So helpful.
Thank you.
Good, sweetheart. What else, you people? Maybe it's enough. It's enough. Come on. Isn't it? Surely. Yes. So much food for thought. Then poor Dundrup can go to bed. It's late for him. It's only 10:15. It's not too bad. And then Anna can go to bed. I think we finish. We'll just do 3 minutes of watching our mind, of watching our breath. Okay. We just so simple. Just sit up straight, be comfy, close your eyes, and as the most natural thing in the world, just in order to learn to focus, just simply pay attention. That's all. Attention is one part of the mechanics. You just pay attention. That's it, to the breath. And whatever thoughts pop up, let them come and let them go. That's the practice. About 3 quality minutes. Watch the breath. Pay attention to the breath. Just let the thoughts come and go. Don't get caught up in them. Just watch the breath. Okay, relax. 3 quality minutes. Okay, sweethearts. That'll do. Until whatever next, who knows. Thank you very much, Venerable Chandra. Thank you, everybody, for all your questions. Thank you, Cynthia and Anna and Catherine. And where else is there? Thank you for that information, Jane, exactly the right person, and Jennifer and Sarah. Okay, sweethearts, much love. See you next time. Jangchub, Semchog Rinpoche, Ma Kie Panam Ke Gyuchik, Kie Panyam Pa Me Payang, Gong Ne Gong Du, Pelva Shok. Okay. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you, Venerable.
Much love, everybody.
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
Thank you, Venerable.